to you both. How are you?
Very nervous.
Great.
It's very on brand for the film. This is good. I thought I'd start by first of all saying congrats on a fantastic film. I really, really loved it. I want to start with the most important question. So, Daisy, this is it. Have you grown more or less fond of cottage cheese since the making of this movie?
Fun fact, I've never eaten cottage cheese. In fact, my mum's here somewhere. I've probably maybe eaten it from her plate once. I've never, in memory, eaten cottage cheese, and I'm vegan now. So certainly since that was a delectable coconut situation.
I think Dan had to make you.
Yeah.
He made her some cottage cheese that was vegan.
Yeah.
Amazing. So how many takes did you have to do of it? How much did you have to eat?
It was actually okay the first time with the burger and stuff, and
Yeah.
over a bit of time.
Yeah,
I was
it was the amount
Yeah.
over time. But like the first couple setups, it was like, oh, this is fine.
And
And
then
then
we had that conversation about, like, I was going to use the fork in my left hand.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a strange conversation about which
well,
hand.
because you were cutting it like a British person, and I went oh, that's a British person, and then Dustin went, I think it's kind of weird. I like it. It's like alien. And I was like, yeah, that is cool. And you were just like, what are we doing? I was like, we're doing it. We're going to keep going. But yeah, I think there was a moment where you were like, I think I've reached my limit. Yeah. And I was like, that's understandable.
So Fran says not bad about 13 minutes into the movie. That's her first bit of dialogue. And then the next bit of dialogue is that cottage cheese line. It's a very internal performance. There's not much dialogue. Looking at that as an actor, is that more freeing to you or more daunting when you see a character like that?
So Rachel and I had talked in the run-up a few times, and while I'd been doing accent prep, sorry, let me tell the story in the correct order. So the script that I read had lots of voiceover, but my feeling was that I would try to use the voiceover as stage directions. And I didn't know then if we would use the voiceover. And we recorded like a couple lines of it at the end of filming. But what was interesting for me is I really did have I was essentially monologuing in my head as we were filming. So I always, and obviously as an actor, you invent often what is going on in your head. But it was wonderful for me because I came in knowing exactly what the writers wanted. And what is amazing is the response is so personal and so subjective of who Fran is and her experience and her life within this office. But it was very comforting to me because I always knew where she was and what she was feeling or what she was thinking. And then we didn't end up using the voiceover.
We did not need to.
No, you did not. No, you did not. Rachel, one of the things I love about this film is the office banter that is always in the background. How much of that was in the script and how much of that was improvised? Because you got some amazing comedic actors in this film.
I would say like that stuff was really the majority of the improvisation in the film. There's other areas like that featured Dave where he got to have his flourish of his talents, and Daisy also was like a stone cold killer when it came to the improv. She was like, I can't do it. I think I told you I didn't believe you. I was like, no, there's a killer in there. But yeah, I would say maybe 70% of what you see in The Office, that's like the life of The Office, as well as a lot of the conference room scene was invented on the day, created in the moment. We had this incredible ensemble. They just, dialed into the tone, to the world, what we were doing, and lived believably in that space. And then, bought in on the strange humor that I was going for immediately. And it was like, I didn't have to explain it that much. I was like, no, you're just going to talk about this HDMI cable like your life depends on it. Because it does sometimes. You're like, but I need it.
Absolutely. Daisy, Fran has her routine and habits that we get to see, especially early on in the film. As an actor, do you have any routines and habits that you do? And did making this film, did that shake you up out of your routine in any way?
That's a good question.
So good.
My main thing is I go to bed early. Do you know, actually, the thing that did shake me out is I'm not hugely sociable. When I'm working, I like to get my sleep. And actually, this is probably the most sociable I've ever been. We were just out of, it had been like heavy lockdown. It was so wonderful. We were like testing every day, so it was really still in that period of time. But it was so wonderful to be together. So in fact, my difference was that I spent a lot more time going to dinner and going for drinks, which I would say usually I wouldn't do. But also we all lived in the town, we all lived really close together.
And then I think it also helped that the first week was in the office, and there was this sense of like, we were all just working in this office, and the way that we were setting it up every day for this ensemble to play, and that you were part of, it created like we were all at work together in a really organic way, so it felt natural to be like, all right, we finished work for the day, want to get a beer? Like it felt like that's what you do, and I think that perhaps that encouraged you to just sort of slip into it, maybe.
And there was, strangely enough, a tiny little coffee stand in a car park. So
The kiosks!
Yeah, so I would go and get my coffee in the morning, which felt like my lovely routine, and then go into work. But in a general way, I don't really have a routine bar sleeping.
That's why you have to drive yourself to work. Yeah.
Sleep is good. We all need it. I want to talk a little bit about casting Dave Mehech as Robert. He was fantastic in this movie. And someone who I would not have thought of for this role, but he's sweet, he's charming, he's wonderful. What were you looking for when you were casting this role? And when he walked into the room, did you both immediately just know that this is the guy?
Well, I was looking for someone who is either deeply in comedic performance or ideally a stand-up, because I love working with stand-ups. My idea was to surround Daisy with as many comedians as possible in the film to begin with, and I thought that would be a great energy for this part. And I was really in love with the show Rami. He came up in conversation with me and Alex. I also felt like Robert needed to be benign immediately, like someone where you're like, there's nothing sort of like agenda driven here. He doesn't have a secret goal with her. What you see is what you get. And he had that perfect blend of those attributes. And then you met him for the first time, I think, when we were there. And you guys seemed to get along like you knew each other. It was very easy, which was a nice sign.
Yeah, and I mean, Dave, well, because he talks about this in his stand-up, he's quite a nervous person. So meeting him for the first time, I was like, wow, he was really quiet. And then sort of over time, but it was wonderful because our friendship grew as our relationship on screen did. But he was so warm, so sweet. And then Rachel gave him the fun job of trying to make me laugh. So as we were walking up the hill, every time we did it, he came up with a different story. And I was pretty hard on my glass one time.
Yeah, but he got you.
Yeah, he did.
He got you. Pretty I was rewatching those recently because on the Blu-ray that we're releasing, we're putting some of the outtakes that he does on that scene. Yeah, and we're doing some outtakes of Meg from the conference room, like when she's talking about texting and driving. It was like her passion. Same. But sorry, I don't know what I mean, you watch my movies, so. But yeah, no, he got you every time. But you stayed with it, and you always got the last bit. You always knew how to like just get that zinger. It was great.
Some will call the relationship between Fran and Robert a romance, and I get reading it that way. But my take, I think Fran is just happy to be seen. So can you talk about that and how you see that relationship?
I would agree. I would say there is a romantic feeling for Fran from my point of view, but also romance is a myriad of different things. And my feeling at the end of the film is, for Fran, the biggest step she's taken in socially in her life is saying to Robert, do you wish you could unknow me? It's like the deepest, most difficult thing that she's had to say to someone, and she's trying to bridge a gap that's there. So my feeling at the end of the film is, regardless of what happens with Robert and Fran, he has offered something to her that is so important, whether that's romantic or not. But yes, I think he really is. And the thing that I think Rachel has done so beautifully is make a non-judgmental film. Fran is probably the most judgmental at times, but the people around her don't judge her. She's just doing her own thing. The people in the office are doing their own thing. And Robert comes in and doesn't judge her. He sees her, and he's there and willing to listen, even when she says that awful thing to him. So he's like this steady ship for her to hold on to, which I just think is so beautiful. However it is that story goes for them, I feel like they will always be important to each other.
I love that. I'm going to throw out the questions in just a second, so if you have one, please raise your hand and the Reverend Mike will find you. I wanted to ask, this film was called Sometimes I Think About Dying, and there's a lot of thinking about dying in this movie. The daydreams, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about bringing them to life. I really like the way you filmed them. It feels like we're almost intruding on the daydreams, the way it's shot. So can you talk about bringing that to life?
Yeah, I was basically invited to do whatever I wanted. So we got to make paintings that we felt were not only accurate to the world and to Fran, but also to what we wanted them to stand in for. And I say this a lot, but I do think that when we're thinking about dying, we're really just worrying about living and living well and meaningfully. And we can get so preoccupied with whether we are or not that we can go to the only place that we control, which is within. And that place can be a place of escape, of seduction, of perfect control of any painting you want to draw in your mind. And there's something about a kind of submission, a release. There's something seductive about that feeling because it's relief from the discomfort of being a person who feels so uncomfortable in her world. And so that approach sort of was the motivation for what are we doing atmospherically here? What are the symbols in these images? What do they mean? What is motivating the ins and outs of how we get into or out of them? And I think from all the conversations that Daisy and I had about Fran leading up to it, well, that's just the brilliance of Daisy. I never had to explain, and she just has this deep emotional intuition, I think, as a human and as an artist. And so there was this ability to craft the space and for her to read it and know what it was. I think from being Fran and spending time within her skin and in her world, there was a real easy slipping in and out of those tableaus that we were building together.
Daisy, one of the death daydreams involves a lot of bugs and ants. Can you take me to the aftermath of when cut is called on that scene? What are you doing?
So they were real. And
yeah.
I think the ants were sort of fine and there was a gentle shaking off of my hand, but actually in the forest there were quite a lot of bugs put in my hand.
Yeah.
And initially I was okay. Yeah, and then I was going, "Ooh," and I was like gagging. So I was holding it in and I was like, at the end of the thing, and then there was some more vigorous shaking. But no animals were harmed in the making of the film.
None.
I would say.
I got really enamored with some of the worms that we were working with before we just committed to the snake. And they started, because I didn't want to hurt them, and I had them in these, and I would go to pet stores all the time going, what bugs do they have? And I'd send pictures of Dustin, and he'd be like, get those! And I'd come home with them, because we were staying, me, him, and someone else from the camera department, I believe it was Ben. And so our garage was taken over by these like tubs of worms and bugs, and then when we had to leave, I got really emotional. I was like, Dustin, what am I gonna do? And he was like, I don't know. That's not my problem. That's my problem. Let me be free. And we did. I don't know if it was like a nature thing, but we did release them.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let's start in the second row here. The one with the glasses, yes. Hold on. A mic's coming.
Hi. What, if anything, did you take as playing Fran and you as the director take that you kind of are going to bring with you in future projects?
That was a good question.
Nice one.
That is a good question. I would say trust. When we were filming, I did say, are we getting enough coverage? Because Rachel and Dustin, the cinematographer, moved so fast. And I, thinking I know loads, was
No,
like,
you know
hello, what's
You know
happening?
so much.
But in retrospect, my word for Rachel is intentional. Everything is so intentional. Every frame, everything. So it was really trusting, and I did trust you.
Oh yeah,
But it was
felt
really, I suppose, submitting to someone else's vision of what it is. Because really, as an actor, you're coming into someone else's world that they're creating, and you're slotting in, but you can't fight that because it's their vision. So that was one for me, and generally I just had a really lovely time. So it was another. It was just another joyful thing of each time hoping that a job is that joyful, really.
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple things. One is more personal and emotional, and the other's strategic in terms of the process of making a film. And the emotional one is that I think that Daisy has taught me what I can expect in terms of partnership from an actor. And so then the strategic thing is that it was because of necessity. I'd never been to Oregon in my life. I like setting of a film to be a character. Dustin and I were aware that because the script was very spare, and we were like, I feel like we need some paintings here to have in the film. It's going to be a language. And there was also this sense that we needed to just engage with what the film was. What does it look like? What is its grammar? What is its tone? We needed to anticipate that together. We had plenty of conversations. We were looking at Crutzen paintings, but what is it when we're on the ground? So he and I took about 4 or 5 days, and they were some of the most exciting 4 or 5 days of my life, because we got up at 4 in the morning, went out, found the beauty, slumped through the bad lighting of the day, got back up, got more. And what it allowed me to do is not only find the film in another way, to deepen the language that we'd prepared and put it into action, but then what I love is that then when the actors were there, we had this little like tone piece of some of those images cut together, and it could transcend language. It could transcend me trying to intellectualize what is the feeling of this film. It allowed me to give something to the actors that I think I now know I need to always have. For me, not every filmmaker, but for me, it allows me to transcend something with the actors, and I think that contributed to why we could just slot in so well together.
Gentleman with the outstretched hand and the blue shirt.
Thanks both. I was lucky enough to see Daisy and Magpie last month at South by. My question to her would be, naively perhaps or intrusively, I don't know your history before, but does having a big commercial hit mean that you can choose projects differently? Because that was another one where you're kind of, to begin with, in the background, and then things change. Great film for everybody, by the way, look out for that.
Thanks.
Rachel, I was just going to ask 2 acknowledgements for ice cream sandwich vendors.
Thank you for asking. Finally. I'll take this a quick one. We acknowledge them because we ate a lot of them. A lot. And we had like a derby going on in the house of like, what is the best one? And Alden's Mint won. Sneaker, because Tillamook Caramel was running with it for weeks. And then Dustin comes home and goes, I've got it. And Alden's Mint.
And thank you for seeing that. I suppose the short answer is yes. I was actually talking to someone today about how lucky I feel that I have been able to do so many different things. So yes, a lot of that is being in something bigger. But I would also say, shout out to my team. My agent and lawyer treated this film with the same care that they treat every film. And from Star Wars to this, there couldn't be a wider gap between what those things are, really. In a business way, I don't know what you'd call it, in a financial way, with what we were making both things with. And I think having people who care about you and love you and want you to do what you want to do is really wonderful, because I actually don't think all actors get that. So that's what I'd say. And everyone really facilitated me being able to do this. We had to fit it in at a certain time. So that was also down to Alex, our producer, and yeah, I had this hilarious, when Magpie got into South by, I was on set with Martin Campbell, and I had this hilarious breakdown, and I sent my agent a message, and I went, I just wanted to be a working actor, and I am, and it's amazing. So I feel that wonder of anything I've done has not gone, and this was a wonderful experience, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with everything I've been able to do. Anyway, that's a very circuitous way of saying yes.
Let's go to the gentleman in the glasses and the, I don't know what number row that is, but he's over there. Please keep your hand raised. Thank you.
Hi. I have a question for Daisy and Rachel. Daisy, what do you have to do to get into the role of Fran? Because throughout the entire film, I just felt very sort of deeply connected to Fran. And as for Rachel, about the dream sequences, why do you relate nature to death?
It's natural. In terms of getting into character Fran, what is interesting is I'm quite far away from her, but I found it very simple to slip into her. I think a lot of that came down to the fact that we had spoken at length many times in the run-up to filming, and I had an idea of what I imagined it would be. But I also owe so much of that to the voiceover, because it gave me so much understanding of who she is. And much like the characters don't treat Fran in a judgmental way, I also didn't come into it treating her in a judgmental way. And so much of the her separateness was really Rachel and Dustin, because I was still having a great time. Like I was watching everyone, listening to everyone, laughing with everything, but the way I was placed slightly out of things really, I think, facilitated that feeling of separateness. And it was interesting, even the way we filmed felt quite wonderful, because I was in the office, we were having a great time, and then I was alone for a few days, and it felt like such a stark difference, and it was discovering a new version of Fran in this new world. And then obviously so much of it comes down to Rachel. And I remember the line, "Do you wish you could unknow me?" which always struck me every time I read it, every time I thought about that scene. That felt the saddest moment to me. I remember Rachel saying, "This is something that you've been wanting to ask for so long, like you were dredging that question from your very soul." And that's just an example of the trust that I was sort of referencing, and feeling like I could try stuff and we would see if it worked, and the privilege of time, and even though it was a short schedule, we always finished early, hilariously.
Always.
So there were lots of things at play, but I think a wonderful script, feeling brave enough to try things, and my walk, which I've never done a walk before. And I saw, I think, Ian McKellen on the Graham Norton show, and he was talking about a walk. I thought, Fran must have a walk.
It's crazy because we never talked to you, but Dustin asked me, do you know what kind of walk she's going to have? And I was like, I just want to see that character walk. Yeah. And I never brought it up to you because I was like, I don't want to. I said to him, I'm not going to put pressure on her with her choices. I'm not going to put a spotlight on a choice. Like, let her have her process.
But I practiced.
But then you came in, and then it was like that first day, and the first time I was like,
and it felt like so much of Fran is a shell. She's protecting herself. She's inward. So the physicality I had thought about beforehand too.
We've got time for one more question. Let's go to the back, right at the back. Yep, keep your hand out. So I think she's got a white jumper on. Yep, mic is coming to you on the left.
I just had a massive sigh from my dad going, oh God, don't screw this up. The film has a lot of negative space in the shots and in how it feels. How did you both think that amplified both your performance, Daisy, and how you filmed it, what you were looking for when you filmed it, that sort of thing?
Well, there's a few different things about that. I think one of the easiest ways to talk about it is one of the reasons we shot in the West is there's a long mythological legacy in terms of the visualization in America of the individual against the expanse, and that tension between the self and the vastness. And that has been used throughout most of my country's history to talk about all kinds of things, but very much loneliness, the invention of self, and this idea of what could be possible, and that it's sort of on you to make that possible. And all of those things felt very precarious for Fran. So that's why we shot in the West. And so then we thought about how to frame that, and we were talking to our editor, Dustin and I shot it, and my editor, Ryan, we'll get on the phone and talk. Usually we'll do it a weekly talk for the month and a half to 2 months before we start shooting. Going through the script, going through our shot list, going through all of our approach, and our editor was talking a lot about the sense of space in the pacing of the film. And so we needed to have some conversation. The edit should be synthesized with the photography, and at least I think that's one of the principles I have. Maybe not everyone else does, it's fine. But because it's something I have, when he was talking so much about that space, in the pace, in the cut, in the time, that time was so much a part of the storytelling, we're like, okay, there needs to be a conversation going on here that's supported and cohesive between the visual language and the cut. So it was, I think those two things really put us on a path when we were framing that carried through.
Love that. Final question. You, as an actor and as a director, you sketch in the details of a character beforehand, and you've spoken about doing that. I want to flash forward. Do you know what these characters are doing weeks, months, years from now? Have you thought about that?
I feel like Fran is essentially doing the same thing, but maybe with a quiz night.
Yeah. Yes. At that place that we would go to
Yeah.
with chowder.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's what I love about, there is sadness and loneliness in this film and in Fran's life, but not all the time. And it's just, as we are all trying to connect with people all the time, there's varying difficulties that we're overcoming. And that bridge for her, she has extended that branch, and her getting the donuts, it's such a monumental thing for her to do, that I feel like things would sort of settle back in, but maybe she would be part of the office banter. Maybe she would go to a quiz night, not all the time, because again, I feel like she does love her life, but with more opportunity, I suppose, and more choice. And I will say, a lot of that is chosen. You know, she has chosen not to. Maybe she had tried and she had given up, or however it is that she got to there. So to have the freedom to choose, maybe I will go out and join people, maybe I'll get donuts every couple of weeks. So that's what I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's pretty close to what I thought. And I definitely, you know, the final image is about integration, the integration of her inner imagined self and her outer self. They could live in harmony. Whether that means she's a totally changed person, I agree. I don't necessarily think that she has this like, oh my God, now she's just like living her life. But she's, I don't know. But I do think like
Robert's going to be a very important friend in her life, someone that she'll probably know forever, and feel safe. Carol is so important to her. I think there will always be something very special there. I think that there's possibility now, as she said, this opportunity. Like, who knows? Maybe her and Emma have something. You never know. But yeah, I think that there's this new piece that she's found, and I imagine something very close to what Daisy said.
It's a lovely note to end on. Sometimes I think about Dying. It is out in UK cinemas right now, so tell your friends to see it, tell your family to see it, make peace with your enemies as well. Tell them to go and see this awesome movie. But for now, please give it up one more time for Daisy, Ridley and Rachel Lambert.
Thank you.